Welcome back to our second in the series of lectures on V'chitzu Chavos Meitim, Swords into Plowshares. Last time we spoke about the general development, the Sikha, where the Rebbe Melech Moshiach said that the declaration of the heads of state at the United Nations in Shavat, Tavshin Beis, 1992, was the beginning of Swords into Plowshares. And now we're going to talk about some specific developments in that area. If I were to ask you, what is the most powerful sword ever created, ever devised by mankind? Everyone would probably say, obviously, nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, the most powerful, most destructive sword ever conceived of, ever developed, and has the power and the potential to destroy the whole planet, everybody on the face of the earth. Chas v'shalom, Rahman al-Islam. And just to emphasize that point, it's worthwhile to go back over some of the history of the past 50 years or so and point out that there were times during the so-called Cold War between the United States and Russia when the world was on the verge of such a nuclear destruction. Most people of my generation are very familiar with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. At that point in time, and it was well publicized at the time, the United States and Russia came on the verge of nuclear war, literally. Russia had moved some nuclear missiles into Cuba, which was just 90 miles away from Florida, and the United States looked at this as a threat, which it obviously was, and the threats went back and forth, and both sides were preparing for nuclear war. Now, there's a couple of things that people don't know about how close this came to be a nuclear war. Because in fact, while most of the things going on were on the diplomatic level, and between Khrushchev and President John Kennedy, yet, while the heads of state, the presidents, are the ones that really have the power to order a nuclear attack or call off a nuclear attack, nevertheless, it's a fact that once nuclear-armed aircraft are in the air, it's up to the discretion of the pilot of the particular plane if he thinks it's appropriate to fire the nuclear missile or not. And it came pretty close. There were some mistakes, near accidents, while this crisis was going on, and just by error and by misunderstanding, it almost came to nuclear war. Just to mention one fact, a radar tracking station in Morristown, New Jersey, picked up, at one point, a missile off the coast of Florida. And from all indications, it looked like this was a missile fired from Cuba on its way to Washington. If that were the case, it would be about 10 minutes till it reached Washington and blew up Washington. So immediately, President was consulted and went back and forth what they should do. And there was the head of the Strategic Air Command at that time, General Curtis LeMay, had been pressuring Kennedy all along to attack Russia right off the bat with nuclear weapons, not to wait, not to take any chances. But fortunately, before any reaction could take place, it was confirmed that this was an American missile, had nothing to do with the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was just a regular routine test of an American missile being shot from that base in Florida, and it was shot to go into the Atlantic Ocean. Totally harmless. But such a thing could almost brought the world to nuclear war a couple of times. 20 years later, the same thing almost happened again, except very quietly. And nobody knew what was going on, not even the Americans. This was there was like a war game that the United States played to like test and practice for a nuclear war with no intention of launching any missiles. It was called Able Archer. This was in 1983, and it was just a practice, a trial run, but they went through all the steps to prepare for a nuclear war, to order the nuclear war, to get the missiles ready, to get everyone in position, and the Russians were watching this. Now the Russians knew that America does these war games, and that was nothing new. But somehow they got it into their head that this time they were doing it as a cover, that they really intended to attack, a nuclear attack against Russia, and the war game was just a cover to pretend it was just a game, but in the end they were going to attack. So they got themselves ready. And they, for a serious nuclear war, ordered all their missiles in place, had their nuclear aircraft up in the air, nuclear submarines, everything was ready to strike back. And their situation rooms, they were up all night, ready to press the buttons, and just waiting for the first American missile to hit. Now, America saw all this happening from the Russian side too, but they didn't take it seriously because they thought the Russians were, kind of playing the game back, like, the shadow boxing. No, the Russians were serious. They were ready to strike back, but they waited. They did not strike until America would send the first missile. Of course, America never did send the first missile because it was just a game. And the whole thing just quietly fizzled out. In the United States, this was President Reagan's time, nobody knew about this. The American intelligence didn't know that Russia was seriously intending a nuclear strike back. And the scare, the fright after the fact, when it was seen that this was really the verge of a nuclear war, made both sides get a little more serious about nuclear disarmament. So that was the Cold War. Now, going ahead 10 years to 1992, when this declaration of swords into plowshares, did take place, everything was phased out. As we mentioned last time, the ISTC, International Science and Technology Center, was set up in Moscow to employ the now unemployed nuclear scientists who were working for the Russian military, and they were given projects to use nuclear science, nuclear technology for peaceful use.